I don't know when the jokes started feeling like knives, only that I kept handing them the handle. We were halfway through the Lunar New Year banquet when my cousin Ivy leaned over her steamed crab claw, nudged me with her elbow, and whispered loud enough for 3 other people to hear, "Still no baby? You're falling behind, girl." I smiled. Or tried to. The kind of reflexive upward twitch you do when there are elders at the table and your mom is already pretending not to have heard. "I guess it's not a race," I said, and took a sip of lukewarm tea to wash down the heat blooming in my chest. But the table laughed. Aunt Lily, across from me, snorted into her soup. "Don't wait too long," she said, wagging a soup spoon like a warning. "Eggs don't keep forever. Ask your mom, she knows." I didn't look at my mom. I never do when they bring it up. She never defends me, not directly. She'll offer a laugh, sometimes forced, or a subject change so abrupt it draws attention instead of diffusing it. "Tonight," she said, "let's not talk about age." Everyone here's older than they act, and clinked her spoon into her bowl like it punctuated the topic. But it didn't. My uncle, already red-faced from 3 glasses of baijiu, grinned at me like he was doing me a favor. "When I was your age, we already had 3 kids. You're wasting time with all that Western career woman stuff. Babies first. Love second. Work last. That's the natural order." My husband, Simon, sat stiff beside me. He'd only picked up a few phrases of Mandarin over the years, mostly food-related and curse words, but the tone needed no translation. He reached for my hand under the table. I let him take it, but didn't squeeze back. I could feel the words trying to push their way out of my throat, like steam behind a closed lid. But I stayed quiet. Again. It was the first night of the new year. You're not supposed to bring shame or sadness into it. You're supposed to smile and eat and say thank you for the red envelopes, even when they're handed to you with backhanded comments about how you'll be saving money on diapers again this year. I went to the bathroom instead. Locked the door. Sat on the toilet lid and stared at the little gold fish embroidered on my qipao. The thread shimmered under the flickering fluorescent light like it was alive. I took a deep breath. Then another. Counted the tiles on the floor. My therapist says when I feel the panic setting in, I should find something tactile. Ground myself. I pressed my thumb into the seam of my dress until I left a faint mark. When I came out, Simon was waiting in the hallway. He looked at me like I was breakable, which made me want to break something. "You okay?" he asked. "Fine. Do you want to leave?" I did. God, I did. But that's not how it works. They'll ask questions. They're already asking. We stood there in that hallway of red and gold streamers and uneven tile while a child screamed somewhere 2 doors down and someone started singing a karaoke ballad just off-key enough to be grating. "I can make an excuse," Simon said. "Stomach flu. Jet lag. Something." I looked at him. He meant well. He always does. But he doesn't get it. "You can leave, if you want," I said. "I'm not leaving you here." "Then let's just finish dinner." I didn't wait for him to agree. Back at the table, someone had started passing around oranges. The kids were playing some version of tag around the chairs. My aunt had moved on to telling Ivy she should try for a second now that her first had such a nice head shape. I sat down. Ate my rice. Smiled when appropriate. Pretended not to hear when my grandma leaned over and said, "Don't be too proud. No one's impressed by an empty womb." She said it softly. Not cruelly. Not angrily. Just like a truth she believed would help. And that made it worse. Later that night, when we were folding up the chairs and stacking the takeout containers, because no one actually cooks for 30 people anymore, I heard my mom talking to Lily in the kitchen. "She's trying," she said. "They've done everything. Western doctors, even acupuncture." My stomach turned. "Oh," Lily said. "Poor thing." Then, after a beat, still, maybe she should think about adoption. Before it's too late. My mom didn't answer. That silence said everything. When we got home, I didn't cry. I undressed slowly, folded my dress, placed it in the dry cleaning bag. Simon hovered like he wanted to help but didn't know how. That's the thing about infertility, it makes the people who love you useless in all the worst ways. He finally said, "Do you want to talk about it?" I shook my head. He nodded. Turned off the light. Rolled over. I lay awake for hours. I thought about the fish embroidered on my dress. About how they looked alive in the light, but still drowned in thread. The next morning smelled like garlic oil and scorched incense. It was quiet, except for the occasional pop from the courtyard fire pit where my uncle was still burning last year's joss paper in neat stacks. The ashes drifted lazily upward, gray-black snowflakes dissolving into the pale sky. No one else was outside. That was part of the ritual: burn first, talk later. Simon had gone for a run. His coping mechanism. Mine was pretending I was helping. "You came out early," my uncle said, not looking up from the burning tin. I couldn't sleep. He nodded, still focused on arranging the folded gold and red paper ingots. "They get louder every year," he said, and I couldn't tell if he meant the fireworks or the family. I handed him another stack. He added it carefully, pausing to press one side so it would catch better. His hands moved with practiced grace, like he could do this with his eyes closed. "I'm sorry about yesterday," he said, after a long moment. I looked at him. Surprised. He still didn't look at me. They shouldn't say things like that. Especially not in front of everyone. "It's fine." "It's not." I didn't know what to say to that. No one else had acknowledged it, not last year, not the year before, not the 5 other times it had come up over dinner or mahjong or in the comments section of a WeChat group chat. It was just something they did. A cultural tax. You sit through it. You carry it home like an odor in your hair. "You know they mean well," he added. I flinched. Do they? That finally got him to look at me. "They think it's love. It's not the kind you want, but it's the kind they have." I didn't reply. Because he wasn't wrong. That's what made it harder. The insults didn't come from strangers, they came from the people who wiped my nose, taught me how to count dumplings, who mailed me boxes of dried plums and Tiger Balm when I was in college. It's not hate. It's care that curdles. Love twisted by expectation. And when it starts to rot, you're the one who smells like failure. Later, back inside, everyone had gathered again for breakfast. Congee, pickled radish, tea, eggs, laughter. Simon had returned, sweat drying on his neck, his smile more forced than usual. I could tell he'd passed someone on his way in. His eyes said something happened, but I didn't ask. I sat beside my mother. She offered me a peeled orange. "A peace offering, maybe." "You look tired," she said gently. "I didn't sleep." She pressed the orange wedge into my palm. "Too much thinking." I nodded. Ate the orange even though my stomach protested. Across the table, Ivy was showing off pictures of her toddler in a hanfu, his face smeared with tang yuan. The group Kuden clucked and offered collective praise the way only Chinese aunties can, like hands in synchronized admiration. "Look at those cheeks. He's so chubby, so lucky." Ivy feeds him soup made with cordyceps. Expensive but good for the lungs. No one asked me if I wanted to see. No one passed me the phone. I stared at the rim of my bowl, at the pale swirl of rice floating inside like it didn't know what it was supposed to become. Simon reached under the table, rested his hand on my knee. I let it stay there this time. Then came the moment that unraveled me, not a shout, not a scream, but another harmless joke. "Next year, we'll need a bigger table if someone finally gives us good news," Aunt Lily said, raising her eyebrows in my direction. "Maybe we should put baby rice cakes in your red envelope, to hint hint." It was met with polite laughter. The kind that makes you want to peel off your own skin. I looked up. Right at her. "I'm not pregnant." I said it calmly. Quietly. Like I was reading a fact off a page. I haven't been able to get pregnant. We've tried for 4 years. I've had 2 failed IUIs and 1 miscarriage at 8 weeks. So unless you're planning to pay for the next round of IVF, maybe you can leave my uterus out of your comedy set." The laughter died instantly. The table went still. My cousin dropped her chopsticks. Lily blinked, her mouth slightly open. "I didn't mean." "I know," I said. "You never mean it." And then I stood up. Not fast. Not storming. Just, done. I walked out, past the dining table, past the faded red banner with the crooked character that had been hung upside down for luck. Past the row of shoes at the door, the clatter of dishes behind me, the silence that stretched like elastic about to snap. Outside, the sky had darkened. Clouds threatening rain. The fire pit had burned itself out. I sat on the stone bench beside it, arms wrapped around my knees like a child. I didn't cry. There were no tears left, not after all these months. Only a kind of bone-deep weariness. The fatigue of pretending. A few minutes later, the door opened and shut. I didn't turn. Footsteps on gravel. Then a quiet voice, "You dropped this." Simon. Holding my scarf. I took it from him, wrapping it around my shoulders like armor. We sat in silence. He didn't ask questions. He never does, not when I need to be quiet. "I can't go back in there," I said eventually. "You don't have to. They'll think I'm dramatic. They already do." I gave a short, humorless laugh. "That's comforting." Simon leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "What if we didn't go back? What if we just left? Now? Why not?" I thought of my mom. Her small attempts at kindness. The orange wedge. The downcast eyes when they teased me. She'll be embarrassed. She'll survive. I looked at him. "You don't get it." "I don't," he said honestly. "But I see what it's doing to you. And I don't think you have to keep letting it." We sat like that for a long time. And then, for the first time in my adult life, I stood up from a family table and didn't return. We left our coats behind. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't collect the red envelopes that were probably waiting for me in a neat pile near the gifts. I didn't explain or apologize. We walked out into the thickening gray of late afternoon, past the koi pond where the fish huddled near the bottom for warmth. Past the stone lions, chipped from years of weather and firecracker residue. When we reached the car, Simon opened the door for me. I got in, heart pounding in a way that felt almost holy. As he drove, the rain started, soft at first, then steady. It tapped against the windows like it had something to say. And for once, I didn't listen. The car ride was quiet. Not strained, just full. Like the air between us had weight now, something substantial but not suffocating. Simon's hands stayed steady on the wheel, though I caught the occasional glance in my direction. He didn't ask if I was okay. Maybe he knew I wouldn't answer. We drove aimlessly for a while. Past the wet gleam of storefronts closing early for the holiday. Past noodle shops with red lanterns swaying under dripping eaves. Past the old park where the cherry trees bloomed too early some years, only to be frostbitten by regret. I watched it all blur by, my face half turned toward the window, cheek pressed lightly to the cold glass like I needed proof that I was still here. I didn't cry. Again. It worried me, a little. I used to cry all the time after doctor's appointments, during ultrasounds that showed nothing but emptiness, in the middle of commercials with giggling babies and soft lullabies. But lately, the grief had settled into something drier. Cracked earth instead of flood. We ended up at a Korean cafe, tucked between a laundromat and a pet groomer. It was open. Warm. Smelled like caramelized sugar and old wood. There were 2 other customers, teenagers bent over their phones, laughing softly in a corner booth. No one looked at us when we walked in. Simon ordered hottiak and ginger tea. I found a seat near the window, where condensation painted everything in blur and softness. When he brought the tray over, he sat across from me and didn't speak until I broke a piece of the pancake and popped it into my mouth. "You always chew like you're thinking 3 thoughts at once," he said. I smirked. "And you always narrate me like I'm a documentary subject." He smiled, but it didn't fully reach his eyes. "You scared them, you know. They'll survive." Still. That was bold. "No," I said. "It was overdue." He nodded, but something flickered behind his gaze. Concern, maybe. Or hesitation. "You've been so quiet lately," he said. "Even with me." I haven't had the words. "I'd rather silence than lies," he said, and it wasn't a dig. It was a truth laid gently between us, like a dish we could share or ignore. The ginger tea burned sweet on my tongue. The rain hadn't let up. Somewhere outside, a car honked 3 times, long and impatient. "Sometimes I think I only exist in relation to what I can't do," I said finally. "I'm the daughter who can't give my parents a grandchild. The wife who can't finish what we started. The cousin who's always next year, maybe." It's like my body became a punchline. Simon flinched. "Don't say that." "Why not?" "They say it. All of them. They dress it up in red envelopes and gossip, but that's what they mean. That I've failed. That I've fallen out of sync with what I'm supposed to be." "You're not a failure," he said, quietly but firmly. I didn't respond. Because I knew he believed it. I just didn't know if I did. After a while, he reached across the table, fingers brushing mine. "What do you need from me?" he asked. It was the softest question. And the hardest one. "I don't know," I said. "I don't think I know how to need anymore without feeling guilty for it." Simon exhaled slowly. "You don't owe me an answer tonight." We sat for another hour. Ordered another round of tea. Watched the teenagers leave. Watched the rain thicken into something almost snow. When we left, it was dark. The world felt a little more hushed. Or maybe it was me. At home, I showered for too long. Let the steam fill every inch of the tiny bathroom until I couldn't see myself in the mirror. I stayed under the water until it ran cool, and even then, I didn't move for a while. Simon was already in bed when I came out. He didn't say anything when I slipped in beside him. Just turned, wrapped his arm around me, and held me like I might float away if he let go. That night, I dreamed of children I didn't know. One had my nose. Another had Simon's crooked pinky. They were laughing, running in circles, trailing silk ribbons behind them like kites. I didn't try to catch them. Just watched. And when I woke up, I couldn't remember their faces. The next morning, my phone had 3 unread messages. "Mom, I saved you some dumplings. They're in the freezer. Come by whenever." Ivy didn't mean anything by it. "Hope you're okay." Aunt Lily, no words. Just a sticker of a crying cat holding a sign that said sorry. I stared at them for a while. Didn't reply. Simon made coffee. Brought me a cup without asking how I slept. Good man. We sat in silence on the couch, the way we often do now. Not because we have nothing to say, but because we know not all pain requires narration. Then he asked, "Are you going back?" I didn't answer right away. "No," I said finally. "Not yet." "Okay." And that was the end of it. No pressure. No disappointment. Just space. Later that day, I went through my closet and pulled out the dress from the night before. The red silk chipa with the embroidered fish that now felt like a costume. I laid it flat across the bed, traced the gold thread with my finger. I didn't know if I'd wear it again. I didn't know if I needed to. By the end of the week, the red lanterns in the neighborhood started coming down. The local bakery stopped selling sweet rice cakes. Life slipped back into routine. But something in me stayed different. It wasn't healing, not yet. But it was a start. The absence of apology. the quiet after the leaving. The knowledge that I didn't shatter from it. That maybe, for the first time in years, I chose myself and the world didn't end. 3 days passed before I called my mother. Not because I wanted to, but because the silence between us started feeling unnatural. Not tense, exactly. Just warped. Like an old table leg that doesn't sit quite flat anymore. I stood by the kitchen window while the phone rang, staring out at the empty alley behind our apartment. A delivery scooter whirred past, its plastic box rattling. Somewhere, a dog barked once and then stopped. Life, undisturbed by the ripple I'd caused. She answered on the fourth ring. Hello? Her voice was calm. Soft, like it always is when she doesn't know whether she's about to be scolded or needed. Hi, I said. It's me. A pause. I know, she said. I've been waiting. That surprised me. We didn't talk about what happened right away. Instead, she asked how the weather was. If Simon was still drinking too much coffee. If I was remembering to wear socks inside, her way of scolding me gently for having cold feet since childhood. I answered. Even chuckled once. She finally said, "You left very fast." Yeah. I didn't know if you were coming back. I didn't either. Another silence. Longer, heavier. I'm sorry, she said. I blinked. For what? For not stopping them. I leaned against the counter, staring at the half-dead potholes on the windowsill. It's not your responsibility. But I'm your mother, she said. Isn't that supposed to mean something? It does, I said. It's just never meant that. She exhaled into the phone. You know they don't mean to hurt you. I know, I said. But they still do. Ivy called me, she added, after a moment. She said you embarrassed her. I closed my eyes. She thinks I embarrassed her? I asked. She's young, my mom said. She's 36 and has a master's degree. She's not that young. She's scared, my mom replied, and it struck me as strange. Everyone is scared of something. That's where all this comes from. What could she possibly be afraid of? Of being forgotten. Of having done it right, but still not being special. I didn't know what to say to that. When people think they're ahead in some invisible race, she continued, they need to believe others are behind. I thought about that for a long moment. She could have just said something, I whispered. Instead of making it a joke. She doesn't know how to be soft, my mom said. Not the way you do. It was the first compliment she'd given me in months. Maybe years. I didn't thank her for it. I just let it land where it needed to. We hung up without resolution, but also without damage. That, in our family, was the highest success. The next weekend, Simon suggested we drive upstate. No plans, no purpose, just to get away. I think he sensed I was fraying again. Not unraveling. Just thinning at the edges. We stayed at a small lodge near a lake, the kind that smells like pine and dust in old stories. There were no televisions, just a scratched record player and a stack of jazz albums that crackled like firewood. We hiked one trail, barely, and spent the rest of the time in silence or small talk. We didn't mention babies. Or families. Or the stretch of years that had led us here, to this in-between place where nothing felt certain but the passing of time. On the second night, we sat by the fireplace in the lodge lounge. No one else was there. Just us and a half-empty bottle of wine. Simon said, I know it wasn't just about them. I looked at him. What happened, he said. At dinner. That wasn't all about them. Was it? I stared into the fire, the way you do when you need time to find the honesty inside you. No, I said. It wasn't. He nodded like he already knew. Which, of course, he did. I think I needed someone to blame, I said. And they were easy. They always are. Simon was quiet for a long time. Then, carefully, Who are you really mad at? I wanted to lie. Instead, I said, my body. He didn't flinch. Just waited. All it ever had to do, I said slowly, was one thing. The thing it was designed to do. And it failed. Simon didn't argue. Didn't tell me I wasn't broken. Didn't say the usual, tired truths about worth and identity and how parenthood doesn't define us. He knew I'd heard them all already. Knew they wouldn't land. Instead, he said, your body also survived a miscarriage. It survived months of injections. Blood draws. Hormones that made you sick for days. It held grief you didn't even have words for. That doesn't sound like failure to me. I swallowed hard. Looked down at my hands. I just don't know who I am without this dream, I said. I built everything around it. Simon reached for my hand, callous thumb tracing over my knuckles. Then maybe it's time to start building something else. The idea came slowly. Not as an epiphany. More like a loose thread. I pulled it over time, not realizing it would unravel a whole shape beneath. I didn't want to try again. Not right now. Not with doctors. Not with clinics. Not with folders full of acronyms and graphs and outcomes. I wanted silence. I wanted space. Simon agreed. No timeline. No decisions. Just time to breathe. I told my mother first. Her face on the video call stayed neutral for a beat too long. Then she said, so you're giving up? No, I said. I'm pausing. There's a difference. She looked away. I just worry you'll regret it. I already regret a lot of things, I said. But not this. It didn't satisfy her, but it quieted her. We didn't tell the rest of the family. Not directly. We let the silence speak. Let the absence of updates replace the need for defenses. They filled in their own blanks, I'm sure. They always do. I went back to work. Took on a new project. Started painting again, nothing ambitious, just color on canvas. Movement. Breath. I saw a woman in the park one afternoon, rocking a stroller with one hand while eating a sandwich with the other. Her hair was wild. Her shirt had spit up on it. She looked exhausted. She also looked at peace. I watched her for too long. Then forced myself to walk away before the ache could burrow in again. One night, Simon asked, if we never have kids, do you think we'll be okay? It wasn't an accusation. It wasn't even fear. Just a question. I thought about our apartment. The coffee mugs we'd bought together. The long conversations. The laughter in the car after terrible music. The way he looked at me when I wasn't speaking. I think we'll be more than okay, I said. And I meant it. For the first time, I meant it. Spring arrived like a question. The kind you're not sure you know how to answer. Not winter, not summer, just this in-between, half-warm, half-wet season where cherry blossoms bloomed too early and the air carried both hope and something sour underneath. I started sleeping better. Not great. Just better. Enough to dream again. Sometimes I'd wake up with the shape of a dream still hovering, half-formed shadows of conversations, a hand-brushing mind that wasn't Simon's, a hallway that kept growing longer no matter how fast I walked. Dreams that weren't painful, just uncertain. Like my brain was asking me to look closer at something I'd buried under years of trying. Simon and I didn't talk much about the pause. Not in specific terms. It was something understood. Like a ceasefire. Like we were each learning to breathe without flinching. But something changed in the house. Not in any dramatic way. It was small. Almost imperceptible. The way dust settles differently when the light shifts. The way silence isn't empty, just waiting. We had a second bedroom. Technically. It had always been the other room, a space that absorbed all the leftover pieces of our life, boxes of tax documents, an old stationery bike, a pile of framed prints we never hung up. For years, it had quietly stood in the background of our lives. Unnamed. Unclaimed. At one point, it had been the nursery. Or at least, the idea of one. We never called it that out loud. But when we moved in, I remember tracing the edge of the window frame with my fingertip and thinking, this would be the crib wall. I remember Simon standing in the center of the room, arms crossed, saying, we could put a mobile up here. Something with stars. That was 2.5 years ago. Since then, the room had become something else entirely. Not just a storage space, but a kind of silent witness to everything we didn't say. I stopped going in after the miscarriage. Just closed the door and walked past it for months like it didn't exist. But one morning, I opened it. I didn't plan to. I was cleaning, vacuum in hand, earbuds in, half distracted by a podcast about architectural disasters. I passed the door and, without thinking, pushed it open. The air inside was stale. Not musty. Just forgotten. I stepped inside and stood there for a long time. Let my eyes travel over the towers of cardboard boxes, the rolled-up yoga mat, the laundry basket of tangled cords. This room had become a monument to waiting. A museum of what we'd set aside. I didn't clean it that day. I just stood in it. Let it be. The next day, I went back. This time, I brought a trash bag. I didn't do anything drastic. No Marie Kondo purge, no tearful makeover montage. Just one thing at a time. A stack of junk mail. Old chargers. A broken lamp we kept saying we'd fix. Gone. It took 3 weekends. Simon didn't ask what I was doing. He noticed, of course. But he let me come to it on my own. That was his gift. Knowing when to leave space. On the 4th weekend, he walked past the room, paused in the doorway, and said, feels lighter in here. I nodded. Thinking of turning it into something, he asked. I don't know, I said. Maybe. But I was already imagining it, a reading nook. A place to write. Maybe a futon for friends. A room not for waiting, but for living. Around the same time, my cousin Ivy messaged me. It was short. A screenshot of a flyer for a wellness event, something to do with guided breathwork, inner child healing, and ancestral reconnection workshops. Below it, she'd written, your kind of thing? I stared at it for a while. Then, is this an apology or an invitation? 3 dots. Then, maybe both. We hadn't spoken since the New Year dinner. I'd ignored her earlier message. The one where she said I embarrassed her. But now, staring at that flyer, I wondered if this was her way of inching towards something that looked like acknowledgement. So I replied, I'll think about it. The event was at a rented community center downtown. Low ceilings. String lights. A table of tea and gluten-free muffins. I didn't know what I expected, maybe something cultish or overly performative, but it was surprisingly gentle. A circle of women in loose cardigans. Soft voices. A facilitator with a notebook full of questions. One of them was, what part of you did your family never make room for? I didn't answer out loud. But in my head, I whispered, the part that stopped trying. After the session, Ivy came up to me. She looked smaller. Not physically. Just less polished than usual. Her lipstick was faded. She was holding her own tea like a shield. I didn't know, she said. I raised an eyebrow. I didn't know you'd gone through that much. I thought you were just private. I nodded once. Both can be true. She looked down. My mom said I shouldn't have said what I did. Did she say it to you or to everyone else? Ivy winced. To me. Quietly. You know how she is. I did. I'm not looking for an apology, I said. She blinked. You're not? I'm looking for space. That's it. She looked like she didn't know what to do with that. But she nodded. Well, she said, if you ever want to hang out. Just, like, not family stuff. Just us. I'll think about it. Weeks passed. Spring became real, sun-warmed air and cherry petals pasted to sidewalks. I repotted the pot hose. Painted the spare room a soft green that reminded me of morning light. Simon hung the prints. We bought a small desk. I started writing again. One afternoon, I got a letter from my grandmother. Not a card. An actual letter. It was short. Neat block letters on lined paper. Dear May, I don't understand everything you are going through. My time was different. But I know what it feels like to be talked about when you are not in the room. When I was your age, they said I was too loud. That I read too much. That I scared away good men with my opinions. I married anyway. But I didn't forget. I hope you find peace on your own terms. Love. Amma. I read it 3 times. Then I placed it in the drawer of the desk, beside a small box of old ultrasound photos I wasn't ready to throw away. Not yet. Some things don't need to be decided. They just need to be witnessed. One night, Simon came home with takeout and a small wrapped box. What's this? I asked. Open it. Inside, a tiny ceramic koi fish. Red and gold. Hand-painted. Its fins curled like it was still moving. You said you loved the embroidery on your qipao, he said. I held it in my hand. It was heavier than it looked. I thought it could live in the new room, he added. It does. Right on the windowsill. Facing the light. Sometimes, the silence changes shape before you notice it. Like fog lifting, not all at once, but in strands, slow and uneven. I didn't realize how long it had been since I'd spoken to my father until his name came up in a voicemail from my mother. She sounded tired. Not sick tired, soul tired. He's asking about you. Not directly, you know how he is. He asks how the garden's doing, like it means something. Anyway. Just thought you should know. That was all. No request to call back. No guilt-saturated reminders about his blood pressure or his memory lapses. Just a breadcrumb dropped in case I wanted to follow it. I let it sit. Simon and I were in the middle of a project, finally tackling the sliding closet doors that had been jammed since we moved in. We bought sandpaper and wood filler. Argued about whether to stain or paint. I took comfort in the predictability of small tasks. You know what's broken, and you know how to fix it. Family doesn't work that way. Still, a week later, I found myself walking toward my parents' house. It was a weekday, early afternoon. I hadn't told them I was coming. I brought oranges. Not the small seedless kind from the grocery store, real ones, with pebbled skin and leaves still attached. The kind my father liked to peel slowly, spiraling the skin into one unbroken curl like it was an art form. The front gate creaked like always. The door was unlocked. Inside, the house was quiet but not empty. A radio murmured in the kitchen. The smell of ginger and something faintly burnt hung in the air. He was sitting by the window, reading a newspaper that was at least 3 days old. He didn't look up right away. I cleared my throat. Is that a ghost? He asked, without turning. Depends on what you believe. That got a twitch at the corner of his mouth. Not a smile, exactly. But something near it. I brought oranges. He gestured vaguely toward the counter. You still remember what I like. Muscle memory. I set the bag down, leaned against the kitchen doorway. The floor creaked. I noticed he was wearing socks that didn't match, one navy, one gray. That somehow made me feel less tense. How's your wife? He asked. She's fine, I said, then paused. He's fine. That got his attention. Just barely. His eyes flicked up for a second. Then back to the paper. Simon, right. He still likes you, I said. Even though you pretend you don't understand his jokes. They're very Western, he said, like it was a diagnosis. I waited a few more seconds before I sat down across from him. We didn't talk about what happened at New Year's. Not directly. I didn't expect him to. My father has always believed more in absence than confrontation. He was the kind of man who fixed broken furniture without announcing it. Who watered your plants when you were out of town and never said a word. He doesn't argue. He recedes. You're thinner, he said finally. I'm fine. Still working? Yes. He nodded. That seemed to reassure him. If I could work, then the world must still be spinning. If I said I was tired, he'd be forced to notice the cracks. I let the silence stretch until I couldn't anymore. Why did you never say anything when they made jokes? I asked. He blinked. Slowly folded the newspaper. Say what? When Aunt Lily, or Ivy, or anyone made comments about children. Or me. You never said anything. He didn't answer immediately. Just picked at a frayed edge of the tablecloth. You were already carrying it, he said. I didn't want to add to the weight. That's not how weight works, I said, too quickly. You don't lessen it by pretending it's not there. He looked up then. Directly. His eyes were duller than I remembered. Or maybe just older. I didn't know how to help you, he said. I swallowed the sharp reply rising in my throat. You could have tried. I thought I was, he said. By not pressing. By letting you be. I didn't need space. I needed someone to tell them to shut up. That's not our way. I know, I said. That's the problem. We sat in it. The mutual failure. The years of silence that masqueraded as support. Finally, he said, your mother told me you're not trying anymore. Not right now. He nodded once. Do you feel lighter? The question caught me off guard. I don't know yet, I said. I feel less brittle. He seemed to consider that. I never wanted to push you, he said. Even when I didn't understand. That doesn't mean you didn't hurt me. He nodded. I know. I stood up. My tea had gone cold. My hands smelled like citrus. I should go. He didn't stop me. Just said, thank you for the oranges. As I walked out, I passed the hallway mirror, the one that used to hang slightly crooked, now perfectly straight. My reflection looked tired. Not in a bad way. Just honest. Outside, the air was warmer than I expected. I took the long way home. Later that evening, I told Simon about it while we ate dinner on the couch. Leftover noodles. A half-hearted salad. I think he's trying, I said. Your dad? Yeah. Simon stabbed at a piece of cucumber. Trying what? Trying to be present. In his own weird way. Simon gave a small nod. That's something. I leaned my head on his shoulder. Did I do the right thing? I asked. Simon didn't ask what I meant. He never does. He just said, you did what you needed. That weekend, Ivy texted again. Brunch? Just us? I hesitated. Then, okay. We met at a place neither of us had been before. Safe ground. New menus. No family lore in the air. She ordered eggs Benedict. I got toast and jam. We talked about work. Her son. A show we both pretended to be more impressed by than we were. Halfway through, she said, are we okay? I don't know, I said honestly. I miss you. I looked out the window. Watched a couple argue over parking tickets. I think you miss how easy it used to be, I said. Before you had to think about how your words landed. She didn't argue. I'm learning, she said softly. It's slow. But I'm trying. I nodded. That's enough. For now. We didn't hug when we left. Just a small wave. A maybe. At home, I went into the green room. I sat at the desk. Turned the ceramic koi to face the window again. It had shifted in the afternoon light. I opened a blank notebook. Wrote one sentence. I am not what they expected, and I do not owe them a version of myself they can understand. Then I closed the notebook. And felt, for the first time in a long time, like I was writing something that could belong only to me. It started with a bookshelf. We didn't need one. Not really. But I found myself in a second-hand store on a rainy Sunday afternoon, running my fingers along warped spines and sun-bleached covers, and there it was, tucked between a cracked dresser and a folding chair with a missing slat, a narrow, leaning thing with uneven shelves and a dull cherrywood finish that had faded into something closer to rose. It was ugly. Earnest. Already peeling at the corners. And I wanted it immediately. I didn't tell Simon why. I just said, help me carry it upstairs, and he did. No questions, just 2 flights of stairs and one tight turn that made us both curse under our breath. We put it in the green room. It fit awkwardly between the window and the radiator, half blocking the view. It wasn't pretty. But it was ours. At first, we stacked it with the obvious, books. Mostly mine. A few childhood ones from Simon, their pages warped and foxed. Then we added other things. Notebooks. Old cameras. A jar of fountain pens we never refilled. A tiny stuffed elephant from a trip we took to Kyoto, back when we still believed travel might be what changed us. One night, I added something else. The ultrasound photo. Just one of them, the clearest one. The one that made me cry when they printed it, because it looked more like a lima bean than a baby, and I wanted so badly to believe that was enough. I didn't say anything. I just slid it between 2 books, small and quiet, like a prayer nobody needed to hear aloud. Simon found it the next morning. I know because he moved it. Gave it a frame. We never talked about that. We didn't need to. That was the new shape of our grief. Not gone. Just gentler. Folded into the corners of our life like a blanket you still use even when the tag itches. My mother started sending me articles. Not directly. Through links in a shared family chat we almost never use, where she'd occasionally post recipes or blurry photos of flowering plants with captions like early this year. The articles were about women. Older women. Artists. Scientists. Women who never married. Women who did and never had children. Women who reinvented themselves after loss. No comment. No message. Just the link. At first, I ignored them. But one night, I clicked. Then another. One was about a Taiwanese botanist who spent 50 years cataloging moss. Another was about a widow in her 70s who built her own greenhouse and said she finally understood patience. I sent my mother a thumbs-up emoji. She replied with a frog sticker. It was the closest we'd come to reconciliation. And somehow, it was enough. That same week, I saw Ivy again. I hadn't planned to. I'd gone to pick up a gift for Simon's niece, an art kit, and there she was, in the corner of the store, her son tucked into a stroller and covered in cracker crumbs. "Hey," she said, almost like she didn't mean to. We stood there for a beat. I waved. She waved back. Her son sneezed dramatically. "I think he's allergic to everything," she said, rummaging through a diaper bag that looked like it hadn't been cleaned since his birth. I laughed. "Want to get a coffee?" she asked. "There's a place next door." He might fall asleep. I hesitated. Then nodded. "Sure." We sat outside. It was a warm enough day for it, the air just on the edge of comfortable. Her son eventually drifted off, head lolling to one side, cheeks puffed with sleep. She stared at him for a while, like she was memorizing something. "You ever think about trying again?" she asked. I didn't flinch. "No," I said. "Not anymore." She nodded. "It's weird how the wanting doesn't go away, but it changes shape." I watched the condensation slide down the side of my glass. "I used to think I had to want the same thing forever, or it meant I never really wanted it," I said. "But maybe it's the opposite. Maybe letting go is proof that I did." Ivy looked at me like I'd said something profound. Maybe I had. We sat in silence for a while. Then she said, "I think you would have been a good mom." I sipped my coffee. "I think I already am. Just not the way they imagined." She smiled at that. We didn't make any promises to meet again. But we didn't need to. Something had shifted. Not repaired. Just softened. A bruise you can press without wincing. Simon came home one night with a sketch pad. "You said you wanted to draw again," he said. I hadn't said it aloud. But maybe I had, in some way. Maybe grief leaves traces in the air, and love learns how to read them. I opened it. Blank pages. Heavy paper. The good kind. What should I draw? "Start with something real," he said. So I drew the bookshelf. It wasn't good. The lines were crooked, the shading uneven. But it looked like it belonged. Then I drew my hand. Just the outline. And then a second one, reaching toward it. Not touching. Just close. One night, months after New Year's, my mom asked if I'd come for dinner. Just dinner. No cousins. No aunts. Just her, my father, and one of her soups that always tasted like rain. I said yes. The house hadn't changed. But something in her had. She was softer around the edges, like old bread dough that had risen and relaxed. "I made too much," she said, pushing a bowl toward me. "You always do." We ate quietly. My father read a magazine nearby, occasionally muttering about typos in the headlines. Afterward, while washing dishes, she said, "You look stronger." "I feel stronger." She didn't ask for details. Didn't bring up babies or treatments or doctors. She just handed me a towel and said, "Dry." So I did. Back home, I added something to the green room. A plant. One of those hard-to-kill kinds with long trailing vines. I named it Luck. Not because I believed in luck anymore, but because I believed in naming things. Giving them a place. I sat by the window that night, watching the city flicker in the distance. Simon came in quietly, sat on the rug by my feet. We stayed like that for a long time. Eventually, I asked, "Are you happy?" He looked up. "Right now?" "Right now." He nodded. "Yeah. It's quiet. It's real. Me too." It wasn't a declaration. Just a moment. Just enough. That night, I dreamed of a house. Not a real one. Just shapes and light. A hallway that didn't grow longer. A room full of books. A child laughing, not mine, but nearby. And for once, I didn't wake up feeling hollow. Just whole. Just here. There's a word in Mandarin my mother used to say under her breath when she was folding clothes or digging through the junk drawer for batteries, Swan Lu. Let it go. Leave it. Never mind. I used to think it meant defeat. Now I think it means survival. Some weeks after the dinner at my parents' place, I got an invitation in the mail. Not a text. Not an email. An actual envelope with my name in my mother's handwriting, the characters slightly uneven. Inside was a card red in gold, of course, with an invitation to Qingming Festival. Tomb Sweeping Day. I hadn't gone in years. Not since my grandfather passed. That last time, the hill had been muddy and my shoes sank into the earth as if it wanted to hold me still. I remember the smell of smoke, the way the joss sticks never lit properly in the wind. How I'd stood there, going through the motions, bow 3 times, lay down fruit, don't speak too loud. Back then, I wasn't sure who I was mourning. My grandfather, sure. But also something else. Some old belief about family and duty I couldn't name but kept tripping over anyway. This time, I said yes. I didn't ask who would be there. I didn't plan an exit strategy. I just showed up. The cemetery was as I remembered, quiet, sloping, filled with red ribbons and the faint rustle of paper being set aflame. Simon came with me, though he kept a respectful distance, standing near the entrance, hands tucked into his jacket. He didn't ask questions. He just stood. My parents were already there when I arrived. My father was kneeling awkwardly in front of the headstone, brushing away old leaves. My mother was laying down a small bundle of chrysanthemums. No one was speaking. I approached slowly, unsure what version of myself I needed to bring. My mother turned as I arrived. She didn't smile. Just nodded. She handed me a lighter. "We brought extra incense," she said, her voice low. I took the sticks. Bent down. Lit them. The wind was gentler than I remembered. The flames caught without protest. I pressed my palms together and bowed once, twice, 3 times. My legs ached by the second one. I didn't care. As I knelt, I whispered, not a prayer, not quite. Just a breath of truth. I'm still here. Even if I'm not who they wanted. No one heard. But I think he would have understood. Afterward, we stood around the grave in silence. My mother finally broke it. "I'm glad you came." "Me too." She looked at the flowers. "He always liked the yellow ones best." I didn't remember that. I didn't say anything. My father stepped forward. He looked older this time, though I couldn't put my finger on why. Just thinner around the eyes. "You still working?" he asked, almost like a tick. "Yeah," I said. "A little less, actually. Taking time for other things." He nodded, like that was acceptable. Good. That was it. Not a breakthrough. But a line drawn in gentleness instead of fear. After we left the cemetery, Simon and I walked around the neighborhood for a while. The streets were lined with early magnolia blossoms, those waxy white petals already starting to fall. It looked like someone had scattered clippings of silence across the sidewalks. He asked me, how did it feel? I thought about it. Like an old room that doesn't fit me anymore, I said. But I can still stand inside without disappearing. He reached for my hand. Then maybe that's enough. Back home, I found a package on the doorstep. It was from Lena, my oldest friend from college. We hadn't seen each other in a year, though we still texted occasionally. She knew about the miscarriage. She'd been the first person I told, the one who came over with takeout and didn't try to say anything useful. Inside the package was a book. A blank journal. Hand-stitched. On the first page, she'd written, "This isn't for plans or goals. Just moments. Start keeping them. You're still making a life." I held it in my lap for a long time before I picked up a pen. The first thing I wrote was from that morning. Wind caught the incense on the first try. It didn't fight me. For once, nothing did. Simon's mother called later that week. She didn't know everything. Just enough to know what not to ask. "I've been thinking about that second bedroom," she said after the pleasantries. "You ever consider turning it into a studio?" I smiled, even though she couldn't see me. "That's exactly what it is now." She sounded pleased. Good. Spaces shouldn't wait forever. We talked for a while. About garden herbs. About a new bread recipe she'd failed twice. About how Simon had inherited her bad habit of eating cereal over the sink. I hung up feeling lighter. Then, another letter arrived. From Ivy. A real one. It was short. Written in blue ink. No stickers. No emojis. I've been thinking a lot about what I said that night. I thought I was being funny. I thought I was speaking from closeness. But now I think I was speaking from fear. You scared me a little, how clearly you saw through everything. I still don't know how to talk about what happened. But I want to learn. I miss my cousin. The real one. The one who once told me that stories don't always have to be pretty to be true. I folded the letter carefully. Slipped it inside the journal Lena had sent. Some things don't need replies. They just need to be kept. One evening, Simon and I had dinner with two old friends, people we hadn't seen since before the treatments began, when we were still joking about baby names and nursery paint like it was just another task on a list. Over drinks, they asked carefully, "So, are you two still thinking about trying?" There was no malice in the question. Just that old cultural assumption that trying is a perpetual state unless explicitly declared finished. I didn't look at Simon. I just said, "We're building other things." And they nodded. No surprise. No awkward pause. Just acceptance. It startled me how much that mattered. The next morning, I woke up early. The apartment was quiet. The light was soft. I went into the green room and opened the window. The air smelled like dust in spring. I stood there for a while, listening to the city unfurl itself. Then I picked up my journal and wrote. This life doesn't need a title. Just space. Just love. Just me, staying. Somewhere in early June, the light in our apartment shifted. Not dramatically, just in that subtle way light always changes when the season tips past spring and starts leaning into itself. Our windows, south-facing and streaked from too much rain, began catching the gold hour more often. That hour became a ritual. Simon called it our borrowed time, and we'd sit in it like it was an old friend visiting briefly, tea in hand, music low, silence easy. It was around then that I started thinking about permanence. Not in the traditional sense, no big life announcements, no ultimatums. Just small things. What it means to choose a life not built on milestones but on motion. On the people who stay. On the space you carve out and say, this, here, matters. One Sunday morning, I woke up before Simon. The kind of quiet that wraps itself around your shoulders, not to stifle but to remind you you're not alone. I made coffee. Went into the green room. Sat down at my desk. I hadn't touched the ultrasound photo in weeks. I took it out now. Unframed it. My hands didn't shake. I looked at it for a long time. The grainy swirl of possibility that once felt like the entire axis of my future. I didn't cry. But I did whisper thank you. Then I placed it in an envelope. Wrote the date on the back. Folded it gently. Put it in the box at the bottom of the bookshelf. Not erasing. Just changing shelves. After that, the room felt different. Larger, somehow. Like the grief had folded itself neatly and made space for something else. That afternoon, we went to the flea market down by the old church, the one with the crooked bell tower and the street vendors who always overcharge unless you smile at their dogs. I didn't expect to find anything. I just wanted to walk. But then, in the third row, I saw it. A woodblock print. Small. Just barely framed. A koi pond scene, stylized in bold, the colors cracked with age. The fish curved in a lazy spiral, bright orange against a slate blue background. The artist's stamp had faded. I held it up. Simon, beside me, tilted his head. Looks like a cousin of your ceramic one. I smiled. I think it wants to come home. We brought it back. Hung it above the bookshelf. The ceramic koi sat below, looking up like it knew its story had grown longer. We saw Lena again. She brought her new partner, someone kind, someone gentle. We ate noodles on the patio and talked about old jobs, new habits, the soft geometry of reinventing yourself after 35. At one point, she asked, "Are you happy these days?" Simon said yes without hesitation. I waited a second longer. "I think I'm more honest now," I said. That feels like the beginning of happy. Lena raised her glass. To honesty. I raised mine. To lives we didn't plan but still chose. Later that night, Simon and I lay side by side, windows open, the fan humming in that offbeat way it always did. He turned toward me, propped up on one elbow. "I've been thinking," he said. "Dangerous." He smirked. "I want to mark this. This phase. This quiet. This becoming." I looked at him. "What do you mean?" "Something small. Like a ceremony. For us. Not for anyone else." I thought about that. "Like a vow renewal?" I asked. "Not quite. Just something intentional. A day. A moment. A way to say, this is still us, and we're still choosing it." I rolled onto my side to face him fully. "Okay," I said. "Let's do it." We didn't make a big deal out of it. No guests. No flowers. Just a drive upstate, to the lake we visited that first spring after we paused the treatments. We brought a picnic. A blanket. I wore a dress I hadn't worn in years. Simon wore a shirt that still smelled like the cedar drawer in his mother's house. We stood by the edge of the water, sandals off, feet in the muck. It was warm and absurd and perfect. He pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Did you write vows?" I asked, laughing. "Not really. Just thoughts. I didn't ask to read them. I just listened." He said, "I thought I'd lose you to grief. I thought it would turn you into someone you'd have to survive. But you didn't. You became more of yourself. I'm in awe of you every day. And I want to keep choosing this, again and again." I didn't speak right away. Then I said, "I don't always feel brave. I don't always feel whole. But I never feel alone with you. That's the difference." We kissed. It wasn't cinematic. It was better. On the drive home, I held his hand the whole way. The sun set slow. The sky turned the kind of pink that makes you believe in softness again. Back home, I opened my journal. Wrote, "Today we stood in mud and said yes again. No children. No thunder. Just two people in their almost 40s who know the sound of each other's breath. I think that's sacred enough." Later that week, I got a message from my cousin Michael. He's Lily's second son, the quiet one. We hadn't spoken in years, but he'd recently moved back to the city. "I read something you posted last year about invisible grief. I think about it a lot. Would you ever want to get coffee?" I stared at it. Then typed, "Sure. I think we all carry something we don't name." He replied, "Yeah. I'd like to hear more." And I realized maybe that was what I was building now. Not a legacy. Not a bloodline. But a small, steady ripple. Of stories. Of space. Of people finding their way to each other, not because they must, but because they choose to. That weekend, we hosted dinner. Not a party. Just a meal. Ivy came, with her toddler. Lena. Michael. Our neighbor from 2 floors down. Everyone brought something. There were folding chairs and paper napkins and not enough forks. At one point, Ivy's son sat in the green room, flipping through my sketchbook. He pointed at the hand drawings and asked, "Is that you?" "Sort of," I said. He nodded solemnly, as though that made perfect sense. Later, I found one of his crayon doodles tucked between the pages. A sun with too many rays. 2 stick figures holding something between them. A fish, maybe. Or a balloon. I left it there. Another moment. Another layer. That night, after everyone had left, the apartment smelled like citrus and rice wine and candle smoke. I stood by the window. The koi print caught the light. Simon wrapped his arms around me from behind. "We're okay," I said quietly. "We're better than okay," he replied. I nodded, leaned back into him. The city breathed outside. And I did too. Not in defiance of what never happened, but in celebration of what did. A few weeks after the dinner, I got an email from an old professor. She ran a small literary journal, now local, niche, mostly essays and quiet things that wouldn't make it past the glossy magazine gates. She said she'd read a piece I posted online last year, something about grief and furniture, and she asked if I'd consider writing something longer. I almost said no. Not because I didn't want to, but because I wasn't sure what there was left to say. I had said so much in silence already. In the plants I didn't throw away. In the ultrasound I didn't display. In the way I no longer explained myself to people who hadn't earned it. But the idea stuck. So one Sunday morning, with Simon asleep in the other room and the cat curled like a comma on the couch, I opened my laptop and began. I didn't write about infertility. I didn't write about grief. I wrote about the green room. How it began as a maybe. Then a someday. Then a no one talked about it. Then, slowly, a space again. A place for things that had nowhere else to go. Light. Paper. Color. Words. I wrote about the bookshelf. The ceramic koi. The dusty envelope at the bottom. I wrote about how the absence of something can be just as tangible as its presence, how silence has shape, and how sometimes that shape is not a hole but a room. A room where you learn to live. I didn't name anyone, but I let them in little ways. A mother who folds apology into rice cakes. A father who can't say the words but will ask if you're still working. A cousin who once hurt you without meaning to and later reached back. I wrote without thinking of who would read it. Just wrote. And when I was done, I didn't feel purged. I felt, still, like something had settled. They accepted it. Published it in the summer issue. I didn't tell anyone for a few weeks. When I finally showed Simon, he read it twice. Quietly. No commentary. Then he said, "I hope you know how many people will feel less alone because of this." I didn't respond. I just took his hand and held it while we let the window stay open, the breeze spilling in like breath. A few days later, my mom called. No preamble. "Your father read it," she said. "The thing you wrote." I waited. He said he thought it was very honest. That meant more than I expected. She paused. I thought it was sad. I didn't mean for it to be, I said. "It's not a bad kind of sad," she clarified. "Just the kind that makes you think." I smiled. "That's probably the best kind." "I also think you're braver than I thought," she said. I sat down at the table. Touched the edge of my journal. "Thank you." We didn't speak long. But it felt like she left the door open. That was enough. A few months passed. The green room changed again, just a little. I bought a new lamp. Simon added a speaker. We started using it to read together at night, him with his history novels, me with my scribbled essays and old poetry collections I never finished in college. One day, I went through the drawer and pulled out the envelope with the ultrasound photo. Held it again. This time, I did something different. I wrote a letter. Not to a child I'd never meet. Not to the version of myself that once begged for it to work. Just a letter to the life that never was. It said, "I still think of you. Not as a missing piece, but as a path I walked for a while. You taught me how to hope. And then how to rest. I carry your shape inside me, not as a wound, but as a room. And that room is full of light now. Thank you. Love. The person I became without you." I sealed the letter. Put it in the same box as the photo. I didn't burn it. I didn't bury it. I didn't shred it into ritual closure. I kept it. Because grief deserves a shelf, too. Not to haunt. To remind. Simon and I celebrated our 8th anniversary in early autumn. No big plans. Just a walk through the botanical gardens. A quiet dinner at the place we went to on our 3rd date. The one with the 2 salty fries and the waitress who always calls me babe. He gave me a necklace. A simple gold pendant. Flat. Circular. Blank. When I opened it, he said, "You can engrave it if you want." I said, "No. I like it like this." He nodded. An unfinished circle. Or a full one that doesn't need names. We clinked glasses. The fries were still too salty. I ate every one. One night, I had a dream. In it, I was standing in a house. Not our apartment. A bigger one. Wooden floors. Wide windows. I walked through the rooms, barefoot, and found each one lit by candles, quiet and humming with low music. There were no children. But there was life. Messy, cluttered, beautiful life. Stacks of books. Piles of laundry. A sink full of dishes and a cat curled on a coat someone forgot to hang. And in the middle of it all, Simon. Laughing. Not at anything. Just because. I woke up smiling. That morning, I wrote in the journal. I think this is what peace feels like. Not the absence of longing, but the presence of enough. We still go to family gatherings sometimes. Not all of them. Not when we know the jokes will come. But sometimes. We sit at the edge of the table now. Not trying to fit into the middle. Not waiting for permission to speak or belong. I bring a dish or two. I let them comment on how I've changed. One time, Aunt Lily said, "You look more relaxed now. Less serious." And I just said, "Thank you." She didn't know it was because I'd stopped trying to be legible to people who only read in expectations. That's okay. Not everyone needs the full story. Some people just need to know you're doing fine. The green room is still green. The koi still faces the window. The bookshelf is now too. The sketchbook is almost full. And when people ask me rarely now if we're still trying, I say, every day. Just not the way you mean. And I smile. Because it's true. Because I am. Because we are. Because this, all of this, is a kind of parenthood, too. The parenting of a life. A love. A self. A quiet room with a wide open door and shelves that tell stories in objects, not absence. I never became a mother in the way they hoped. But I became something else. And that is enough. That is more than enough. That is mine. The end.